Right, good evening everybody. Could we start with apologies for absence?
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Susan O'Brien.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters before us this evening? Thank you. In that case, do we approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting showed on pages 1 to 8?
Agreed.
Thank you. As usual, just to confirm that items marked in Part 1, which are agenda items 5 to 11, will be heard in public, and Part 2 will consist of reports 12 and 13. 14 and 15, which are marked to follow, will actually be on the agenda of the October meeting. Okay, on to the first paper tonight, agenda item 5, page 9 of the main agenda, Local Safeguarding Children Board, Annual Report 15-16. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Leader. The report before us is the first that's been produced by our new independent chairman of the Hillingdon Local Safeguarding Children Board, and also has the same role in respect of our independent board for adults. And it is more timely than the ones that we received in previous years, which reflects the fact that local safeguarding children boards, I think, have widely needed to increase the speed with which they reported back to the councils and the partners that they serve. As in previous years, it summarises the activity, the safeguarding activity of the council and its partner organisations, lays out some of the challenges that many of those members will find quite familiar, around things like FGM, female genital mutilation, child sexual exploitation, activity that various organisations are undertaken to tackle those issues, and any areas of pressure around that. I think one of the things for us as a Cabinet to note particularly is the ongoing concern about the lack of contribution from the Metropolitan Police, which isn't just an issue that affects Hillingdon, it is an issue that affects all local safeguarding children boards. In the case of Hillingdon, we receive a sum of £5,000 a year from the Metropolitan Police. And by way of comparison, outside of London, it's quite routine for most police authorities to contribute 40 to 50,000 to each individual local safeguarding children board that they agree with or they operate with. So, that is an ongoing concern. It's a decision of MOPAC, but we need to keep up the pressure on them around that. That said, I think the report stands for itself. If there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but I would certainly commend it to all members of council to read and understand. It's one of those things when something goes wrong affecting the welfare, well-being, or even the life of a child, people will say, well, what did councillors know about this? And this report is the opportunity that elected members get to understand our engagement with the wider safeguarding partnership that we operate with.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6, page 89, Safeguarding Adults Partnership Board Annual Report 15-16. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Leader. I should firstly point out that there is an error in the first page. The report does indeed apply to the year 15-16, but references to it being discretionary for the period are incorrect. It is absolutely a statutory requirement for the period in question. I just want to make that clear before I go any further. Similarly, the report provides an overview of the work undertaken in partnership to help safeguard vulnerable adults, again under the new independent chairman over the last year. The focus, following due consideration, is on mental health and neglect of the elderly. The report sets out how the board has been restructured with people of appropriate seniority to provide leadership to make decisions on behalf of their organisations in a collective way, and an operational group to give effect to the outputs of that decision making. Another key thing, I think, is the development of an effective performance and audit process, something that was clearly an area of opportunity for us. Just a couple of other developments over the course of the last year. The role of the multi-agency safeguarding hub, which plays a crucial part in coordinating the support of those at risk, I think has come on very significantly. And of course, the implementation of making safeguarding personal. This idea that what is done is person-centred, that we agree outcomes and we make sure that whatever support is put in is agreed with individual concerns, that we can be satisfied that we are meeting their desired outcomes as far as we can. So I think it's fair to say that a great deal of positive work has gone forward in the last year. We've certainly made some significant progress, and like Councillor Simmons before me, I would commend the report to Cabinet for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. Is that agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 7, page 153, Interim Local Implementation Plan, Annual Spending Submission for 17-18. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. The report we got before Cabinet this evening is Cllr authorisation to the principals of our local implementation plan 2017-18 annual spending submission to Transport for London. The authorisation is sought as the one-off interim submission. The original instruction given by Cabinet in 2013 has now expired. Before I move the recommendations, it's interesting to read on page 155, second paragraph. Now we have a new mayor. He's only recently been elected, and his priorities are still being clarified. So therefore, TfL were only able to provide interim guidance to councils for 2017-18, and they told us to work on the basis of the 2015-16 spending submission guidance. So this we are doing. The guidance, though, does, however, still cover cycling, bus stop accessibility, crossrail, etc., which is form of our actual submissions when we put them forward. Road safety is in there, the school travel plans are still all in there. But although we're submitting this, and we are going to submit the figures we are within this interim plan, we've got to remember that we may not get that once the priorities of the new mayor have been decided. Personally, I don't think they are probably going to be as favourable as the previous mayor towards Hillingdon, but you never know. So the recommendations we have, recommendation 1, you can see there, but the 2 I will draw your attention to. Recommendation 2 delegates the authority to the Deputy Chief Executive, Corporate Director of Resident Services, in consultation with yourself, Leader, and me as Cabinet Member, to agree the final plan before submission. Then recommendation 3 is an important one, because obviously subsequent progression of all of this is dependent on sign-off by you, Leader, and the Cabinet Member for Finance, Property and Business Services. So there's still all the caveats in there to ensure we totally control this, but let's hope that when it does get to the Mayor and TfL, we do get a favourable response and we do get a favourable settlement coming forward. So I so move the recommendations.
Thank you. It'll be interesting to see whether the new mayor does have the same view of West London as the old mayor. Are those recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 8, page 159, community protection notices as an antisocial behaviour enforcement tool. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. I move the recommendation on page 159 of this report. Community protection notices are another part of the armoury that we would have as a local authority in dealing with various elements of antisocial behaviour, particularly that which is of a persistent or continuing nature. And in the last few weeks and months, we've had a number of examples where issues have come up which I think certainly fall within that definition, and officers therefore would be very keen to have this tool available to them to be able to make sure that we can respond quickly and adequately to some genuine concerns raised by local residents. I recently addressed a meeting of a number of our street champions 2 or 3 weeks ago, and apart from the fact that they very much appreciate the effort that we are going to in terms of trying to improve neighbourhoods and ensure that their requests are dealt with, there was a growing frustration about this sort of persistent, continuing nature of offence and antisocial behaviour. So I do think that there is, as I've always said, an issue for us to continue to educate residents as to what is expected, as well as moving to enforcement when that education is not being listened to. I duly move.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. This is a welcome report. It is an issue for us, particularly in the south of the borough, and we need to take some more robust action. I notice in the financial comments there is no request for additional resources, because this enforcement activity would be going on in some other manner anyway, in a different way. I don't agree with that necessarily, and we may need to provide additional resources for this in due course to make sure it happens robustly. Recommendation agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 9, page 165, planning obligations, quarterly financial monitoring report. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. This is the usual report that comes before Cabinet. You will see under the financial costs the monies we currently hold under the 106 agreements and the 278s. We still got lots of development going on through Hillingdon, as we know. We have developers that like working with Hillingdon Planning Department because within Hillingdon we know how to do it right and we know what to get on behalf of our residents to ensure that we protect them all the way through the processes. Now, the one caveat I will say to my Cabinet colleagues is, again, look under your own portfolios, and if there are any monies you think are not being moved and spent as quickly as you thought they should be, then please either contact myself or relevant officers and ask the questions as to what is happening with that particular money. The recommendation is that we note this, and so I move that recommendation.
So agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 10, page 201, the Council Budget 16-17 month for Revenue and Capital Monitoring Report. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, here we are again, and there's an improvement. So, of course, in month 4, that is a good news story. A general improvement. Net underspend currently forecast at 729,000, which is an improvement of more than 600,000 on last month. There are 6 recommendations at the bottom of page 201 and on the top of page 202, and I'd like to make a slight amendment to recommendation 6 before we go any further. This is an urgent item, so I would seek to add a request that it is not called in by scrutiny. We need to get on with that. It's an opportunity. I'm sure the leader will talk about that further. What might interest people is looking as far as page 248 and 9, and indeed 250, where there's Appendix G, which is the Council's draft efficiency plan. And if anybody wants to know and tell their residents what we've been up to, then in paragraphs 12 in particular, paragraph 12 in particular, shows the lengths that we've gone to and the efficiencies we've achieved to date, which shows that over the last 5 years we've delivered 94 million quid's worth of efficiencies, and there'll be another 13 this year, taking it over 107 million, and that is no small achievement. What is slightly less good news is paragraph 16 on page 250 shows that we've got another 57 million to achieve in the next 5 years. So we're not out of the woodwork yet. It is nonetheless worth underlining those figures, because as well as saving over 100 million or more than 100 million by the end of this year, we've done it and still held council tax to zero, and still renewed libraries, and still delivered all the services, including refuse collection on a weekly basis, and all the other things that our residents tell us they want. So it's not to be sniffed at, and well worthy of my much overused phrase that it's a good news story. But on that note, I'm sure you'll want to add things, Leader. I'll move those 6 recommendations as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. As you rightly say, a good news story with £750,000 up at month 4. The paragraph 9 shows the savings that we've got to make this year, £13.3 million the savings. Now, bear in mind that's after applying 4.2 million of our balances, so our savings, our target was 17.5. We've applied 4.2, and as this paragraph says, that we've already banked over 5 million of that, and a further 5.5 million is on track for delivery. So nearly 11 million of our 13 is well on its way at month 4, which is a very good position to be in. Even with that drawdown of our balances, we would still have 35.5 million in balances, plus whatever we return as a surplus in the current year. Going back to the recommendations, the first one is just to note that forecast position. The second recommendation is the standard one about agency assignments, and they're detailed on page 243 to 247. These are where agency assignments have tipped over 50k in total, particularly around social care. We have a lot of agency workers. 3, to endorse a council's efficiency plan in Appendix G that you've referred to, Councillor Jankel, on page 248. And the point in paragraph 13 is well made, page 249. We actually set up the bid programme in 2009 ahead of the crisis that came upon us in 2010 and years since then. So we were, as the report says, ahead of the curve. We were making the savings and efficiencies before we had to do it, and that has put us in good stead. And as you said, 94 million efficiency savings, a further 13.3 on track. Tax frozen over that whole period as well as all the service issues that you refer to, new facilities built and no service reductions. That is, if you want an efficiency plan, you can't get more efficient than that, really. The point about the coming years, if you look at the paragraph 16 down to 20, is not so much in the coming period about reductions in government funding. It is about as much about the population increase that we're getting, both ends of the age spectrum, as I often mention, and inflationary pressures that we're going to have, factoring in, for the moment, we're assuming a 1% rise in staff salaries over that period. So, as you said, Councillor Bianco, that gives us 57 million to aim at, and I'm sure we'll be turning our attention to that as we get further with the medium-term financial forecast. Back to the recommendations. We agreed to appropriate land at Cllr Crescent in South Ruislip from General Fund to our housing revenue account. This is it's a former day nursery and day centre at Cllr Crescent, and we're going to develop it into a mixture of 19 general needs and 14 supported housing units. Recommendation 5, this is the former garage site at Fir Tree Avenue, be developed to provide 3 houses. And recommendation 6, this is rephasing of money that we've set aside in the MTFF to acquire buyback properties. Where council properties have been sold under right to buy, we put aside money to actually buy properties back. We can buy any properties, but some that come on the market are ex-council properties. And one of the reasons we do that is that we get 30% of the receipt on a right to buy property, but we have to spend it in a given time frame. And the reason that we are asking for a waiver of call-in at this moment is we want to buy some before the end of September to ensure that we don't end up giving any of the 30% to the government. It's all lined up, ready to go. It just needs to go through Cabinet tonight, and we will buy these properties back. With that, I think that's all I need say. A pretty strong position for month 4, and a very good efficiency plan. The reason for the efficiency plan, by the way, is that the government are offering a 4-year settlement to councils that produce an efficiency plan by the middle of October. It's all they're going to do is guarantee the amount they're going to cut your budget by for 4 years, but at least we know where we stand. So we'd rather have that, and that's the reason we're producing the efficiency plan. With that, are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 11, page 253, the school capital programme update. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Leader. Moving on to the question of what are we spending the fruits of our financial efficiency on. This report updates us on the latest position with the school's capital programme. Total just over £300 million funded from a combination of government grants and then substantially through local prudential borrowing and some of the developer contributions that Councillor Burrows referred to. Continue to make good progress. It's interesting that as the economy has begun to pick up and as the changes in things like housing benefits are beginning to have an impact, the position when it comes to predicting pupil numbers has become a little bit less certain, and that's clearly reflected in this report. And we've had a number of examples where we are doing things like putting in temporary classrooms as a way to manage that process. And, of course, should we then see sustained increases in children, then we may need to look at making some of those projects permanent. But this very detailed update sets out where we are with a number of different sites, which members will be very aware of. And again, if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Is that agreed? Thank you. We now move to part 2.